In this video, I'm going to share with you two unique methods from the book Atomic Habits that will help you recognize what your habits are and how to change them with two simple exercises. All right, so first of all, this chapter is called The Man Who Didn't Look Right. And the reason why it's called that is because it starts off with a story from Gary Klein, a psychologist, who told James a story about a woman who attended a family gathering, and this woman was a paramedic. And when she arrived, she took a look at her father-in-law and she got very concerned. And she said to him, "I don't like the way you look." And her father-in-law, who was feeling perfectly fine, jokingly replied, "Well, I don't like your looks either." So the story goes that she insisted that he go to the hospital because a few hours later he was undergoing life-saving surgery after being examined and they determined that he had a blockage in a major artery. And the thing is, his daughter-in-law had this intuitive ability to determine when somebody had a blockage because she was a long-term paramedic. She could determine a heart attack coming before it even happened. So, basically, here's what's happening. When your arteries are obstructed, the body forces it forces the blood to away from anything that's not critical. Your organs need the blood, so it sends the blood to the critical organs, and peripheral locations like the face and the skin don't get the blood. So she could recognize that rather easily. So the point of this is that we are human prediction machines. We are prediction machines, and we can determine, what's coming in advance. We have this capability, especially if you've done something over and over and over again. Like military soldiers, they practice certain exercises over and over again, and they can determine, what's a missile versus what's their own plane. So those are the kinds of things and capabilities that we have. And we don't realize that we're going around predicting things all of the time. Even as we drive our cars or move, maybe as we're going for a walk, we're predicting what's happening. If we're in a mall, we're making predictions as to which direction or which side people are going to pass us on, so we can keep moving around them and get to where we want to go. So we are predicting all the time, and we're looking for things, and our ability to notice the relevant cues in a given situation is the foundation of our habits. Like, we are continually taking in our surroundings and analyzing the information that we come across. And whenever we experience something repeatedly, like this paramedic did, our brain will begin to notice what is important and start sorting through the details and highlighting the relevant cues and cataloging the information for future use. That's how our mind works. It stores information to keep us safe and secure. The last time you went downhill skiing or did something like that, that your mind stored information about your ability to get down the hill safely, avoid the moguls and trees and so on. But, how to get down the hill much easier because you practiced it. And with enough practice, you can pick up on the cues that predict certain outcomes without consciously thinking about it. So as habits form, your actions are directed by your automatic non-conscious mind. James calls it your non-conscious mind. I call it your unconscious mind, but it's your non-conscious mind. So your non-conscious brain, this hard drive, is determining what you do. It's making decisions for you. In fact, there's research that shows that 96 to 98% of our thoughts, behaviors, and actions come out of our unconscious mind or non-conscious mind. And so our habits are directed by that non-conscious mind. It's information that's stored. It's things that cause us to feel safe and secure and take steps forward without getting harmed. So here's the thing. We can't always explain what is going on, but we can learn all the time, right? We can't explain it, right? And if we're trying to see what the relevant cues are or memorize those in a given situation, then we have to realize that, we're not going to be able to explain everything. Everything's not quite as clear as we think it is. So you fall under your old patterns before you realize what's happening. And as you realize what's happening, then you are going to come up against some challenges, and you're going to start realizing that you don't have all of the solutions to everything, but your unconscious, non-conscious mind does. It has all of the bits of information. So the greatest challenge in changing your habits is maintaining awareness. Like, awareness is the first step. I see this all the time. I work with people who, think they're aware, but then once we start pointing out the obvious and we start removing limitations, or we start removing things that aren't working for them, then we start getting really clear on what they want and where they want to go. So this explains why bad habits can sneak up on us, because we're not realizing what we're doing. As habits form, your actions come under the direction of your automatic and non-conscious mind. Like I said, right? You fall under these old patterns before you realize what's happening. And you're repeating these old patterns over and over and over again without even noticing them. And they basically determine your life. Like Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so if 96, 98% of your results, behaviors, and actions are coming out of your unconscious mind, that non-conscious mind, how can you possibly get control over them? That's why Carl Jung is saying, until you make the unconscious conscious, until you become aware of the habits that you are repeating. And it's very critical to understand that if you're going to make a change, any change of any kind in your life, until you realize what the habits are behind it, you won't make enough of a change to make it stick. It won't last. So let's talk about the motivation behind this, because if you're not motivated, then you're not going to do this. And frankly, not many people are motivated to change their habits. Not many people are motivated to change anything. Like, who wants to change? Who wants to stop eating what they're eating, doing what they're doing? Who, does a smoker want to stop smoking? A drinker want to stop drinking? A drug addict stop doing drugs? Maybe, but there's too much going on that's keeping them the same. And the little cues that occur in our environment that cause us to want to repeat those habits. Just like I had friends previously in my previous life that would go have beers, and every time they would drink beer, they would smoke, but they weren't a smoker. But the cue was having beer in a bar, and they would smoke, and they're not a smoker. So kind of weird, isn't it, that they would do that? But that's what was the cue for them. So each one of us has cues. We just have to recognize what the cues are and then work towards overcoming them. Okay, so let's talk about motivation, because motivation is critical. The mindset is what's in your mind, right? What you're focusing on. The motivation is more from your heart. What is behind it? What's the key motivator? Why would you do this, right? Why would you make change? Why would you want to know what your habits are? And we're going to talk about how you're going to recognize what your habits are and change them in a moment. So stay tuned for that. That's the method. So there are no good habits or bad habits. Just recognize that. Only effective habits at solving things. Like, we categorize things as good, bad, neutral. And, we just need to know that it's a habit that we have learned, likely because we didn't have the ability to say no. Let me just explain this. So as a child, between 0 to 7 or 8 years old, we don't have the ability to say no. We don't have the ability to reason. We are not reasoning until we're about 7 or 8 years old. So that's a faculty of our mind. It doesn't switch on and start working until we're around 7, 8 years old. So we don't have the ability to say no. So all the habits that we've learned and that we carry with us throughout our lives have been learned from our parents. We mostly spend time with our parents. Some of us spent time in daycare, some in preschool, or grandparents, but predominantly it's our parents. Whatever habits they have, we learned, and we carry those with us throughout our lives. So we can change them. That's where we're going to come up with this. We're going to talk about the method in a moment, and you'll see how you can change that. Because if you don't like the habits that you see in your parents, then you likely don't like them in yourself. And that's conflict. You're in a conflict with yourself. And if you're in conflict with yourself, it's pretty difficult to move forward and to make lasting change. So let's talk about this a little bit more. So again, habits are not good or bad. They're just defective ones, right? So all habits serve you in some way, shape, or form. All habits serve you in some way, shape, or form. They are there to support you, even bad ones, which is why we repeat them. Why would you repeat a bad habit? Why would you keep, doing something that's not effective? Why would you keep, let's say if it's money related, because I've been studying Ken Honda, who's got a great book called Happy Money. Why would you pay your bills when you're upset or when you're thinking about finances in a negative way? You're thinking about, I don't have the money, or, I'm spending $5,000 on this, on this trip, or on Christmas gifts, and that's going to cause things to be tight to buy food and gas and utilities and mortgage or rent, So why would you repeat the habit of thinking negatively? Why pay your bills in a negative mindset? In fact, Ken teaches us that we should say, thank you, money. And he's Japanese, so he says, arigato, money. So say arigato, money. And you can actually write that as you're paying your bills. Write it right on your credit card bill or your utility bill, arigato, money, and then pay it. And be thankful that you received the credit or you received the service, and be thankful for it. That's a shift. That's a different way to handle paying bills and how you feel about money, because how you feel about money didn't come from you. It started with your parents. All right. So again, what's the motivation? So in your heart, you might want to have better habits. You might want to have a better life. And because you want to have a better life, you have to change your habits, because your habits determine your destiny. The things you repeat compound. There's no question about it. The things you think about, the things you do every day, the habits you repeat, they are who you are. You become your habits. And so if you want to change your habits, then you need a method for doing that. So we're going to talk about that right now. So let's have a look at that. So there is one system called pointing and calling. If you've ever ridden a train or a subway, you know what this is. So I've been on trains. I rode on trains for several years, probably 7-8 years. So on the train, I remember the guy would hold the phone to his head and he would say it nice, loud, and clear. He'd say, all clear, doors are closing, and every single stop he would repeat that. That's called pointing and calling. Why did he do that? Not because he needs to hear himself, but it does actually help if he hears himself. So he says, all clear, doors are closing, and by doing so, his unconscious, subconscious mind is hearing it. Plus, he's saying it for the sake of other people, because he's saying it nice and loud over a loudspeaker. So anybody who's trying to run to the train and get in the door on time, knows what's coming. The doors are closing. So there's multiple purposes for it. So as he points and calls, he knows that he knows what he's doing. He's hearing it and he's seeing it all at once. He's using a few of his senses. Correct? So just by pointing and calling, it's saved so many lives, and it causes people to stop and think. So if the person says all clear, doors are closing, but that's not true, of course they're going to stop the process. They will hear themselves. And so anyway, that's one system that you can use. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So pointing and calling is acknowledging. Basically, you're not acknowledging what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I'm going to show you how this is beneficial for you and your life in a moment. So basically, this is what you do. You say out loud the action you're thinking of taking and what the outcomes will be. And then you hear yourself. You'll hear your bad habits spoken aloud, because that's going to make the consequences seem more real. For example, I have a morning practice where I do some reading, writing, and meditation. And there's times when I see my phone there, and it's a habit. I want to pick it up and check for messages and, get engaged in somebody else's questions or see if somebody responded to me overnight, and then, but I have to talk myself out of it. So I'll pick up my phone perhaps, and I will say, I'm picking up my phone and I'm about to check messages. However, now is my morning practice. This is my me time, and I don't check messages during that time. So I'm going to put my phone down and continue my practice. And that's how I talk myself out of doing something that isn't effective, because it's a habit. We all have it. We reach for our phone in our pockets or on the table, and we do things without any thought at all. And just remember, there's no good habits or bad habits. That's just a habit that you developed, and who knows? Maybe you bought somebody else, or it just was something that was brought into your life through your environment, because you see other people doing it. You do it too. So everybody else is picking up their phone and checking. So are you. If you go into a coffee shop, you see a lot of people checking messages. Or like me, if I go to swimming lessons for my children, I can see that people are sitting there on their phones, checking. I don't know what they're checking or looking at, but they're on it constantly, without even paying attention to what their children are doing, if they're paying at their swim lessons or something like that. So all habits serve you. You just need to recognize what ones are not serving you, and that's how pointing and calling can help you determine that. All right, so that's one system that you can use, and the other one is called the Habit Scorecard. And James came up with this, and I think it's amazing. So this is the first step that you would take before you even point and call. So Habit Scorecard is awareness of your behaviors. You realize what you're doing in terms of your behaviors. So instead of just carrying out what you do, typically you start tracking what it is that you do. Because if our days are about 90% habit, which they are, when you sleep, when you eat, your hygiene and your entertainment and all those little bits and pieces, when you walk the dog and all those things, those are all habits. So we only have about 10% of freedom. And in fact, I call it habit gap. We only have a little bit of a gap every day, 10% of our day. That's all we have. And it's not all at once, typically. You don't have a block of time. Most of us don't, because we're so preoccupied with all sorts of things. We have to maintain our house and our car and utilities and payments and family and food and cooking and cleaning, all these things. So you only have little gaps. And in another video, I'll talk about the habit gap, because if you can get into the habit gap, you'll see. So watch for that video, and you'll see exactly how you can overcome just getting caught in this loop of doing habits and not feeling good at the end of your day. So what you do with the Habit Scorecard is you start recording your daily habits. And all that you do is write them down. Wake up, go to the bathroom, exercise, have a cup of tea, go for a walk. You start writing down what those habits are. Take a shower, whatever they are. Beginning of the day and the end of the day are the greatest times to recognize what your habits are, because you typically have waking routines and sleeping routines, for sure. Throughout the day, they might vary depending on what you're doing and what your career and vocation is. So all that you do is rate them: good, bad, with a negative. Good is plus, bad is negative, and neutral is equals. That's all you do is write your habits down, start recording them. You can put them on your phone in your notes, or you can put them in a journal or on a notepad, but start recording them so that you know what they are, and just rate them. And again, you get to decide whether something's good or bad or not. If checking your phone within the first hour of waking up is what you do, you might say it's bad. I think it's bad, because I'm basically getting on other people's agendas, because my habit is that I check messages and respond to them right away. I don't save them for later. I check them and respond. So if I'm going to check them, then I'm going to respond to them. And that's taking away from my personal time, my me time, my morning success ritual. And I have another video on that, so watch that as well. If you want to have a morning success routine, you definitely want to schedule it and program it and condition it so that you get it done. and it's easy. And everybody, all the greatest leaders, whether you like Oprah Winfrey or Tony Robbins or Richard Branson or any great leaders that we know around the world, they all have morning routines. Even Eckhart Tolle definitely has one. Elon Musk does. It's not great in my mind because he doesn't do a lot of physical fitness and so on. But so everybody does have a morning routine, and you should have one too if you want to be really successful and in control of your life. So once again, coming back to what I was saying, so rate your habits: good, plus, bad, negative, neutral, equals, and just record them. The point here is that you're recognizing what you're doing with your time and what your practices consist of. And the first step to changing habits is to be on the lookout for them. And this is how you can notice them. And if you need extra help, use the pointing and calling system. Catch yourself doing something. And the thing is, when you say it out loud, then you recognize it. You start thinking differently and realizing, wow, I'm giving up my personal time here, or I'm giving up something for something that's lesser value. I'm getting hooked on social media and looking what other people are doing in the world, living my life through their eyes. So, and hearing your habits spoken aloud, that's going to help make the consequences more real, make them more tangible. And that's what you want to do. You want to become aware of them. And once you become aware of them, then you can do something about them. You don't have to keep repeating your same old habits. So that's essentially what James was talking about in this chapter, in chapter 4, the man who didn't look right, and you can get control of it. So here's the takeaways. Start by writing your habit scorecard. Start that today, just writing down what you do as your habits. It might take you a little bit of time to figure out what it is that you're doing consistently, but there are typical things, definitely showering and eating and drinking and exercise, or taking care of the kids or dog or pets or whatever those things are. Basically you might as well classify them as have-tos. You have to take the dog for a walk, otherwise you're going to clean up a mess in the living room. So these are more or less your have-tos. If you don't brush your teeth, what's going to happen. You're going to land at the dentist, and they're going to have to remove some teeth or fill a cavity or something like that, and you don't want that. That's painful. You're trying to avoid it. So you're trying to look for things that in your life that you're doing that you want to avoid in some cases. Like if you start realizing you're doing things that are ineffective, that are moving you away from the lifestyle and the dream life that you wanted, then those are the habits you want to change, and you want to create new ones. And so by categorizing them with your habit scorecard, that's the first thing you need to do. And then pointing and calling. Once you start recognizing what your habits are and the things that you do, and where your attention gets distracted, because you want to have focused determination versus distraction. And that's something that I teach. And so how do you do that? Point and call. Basically say it out loud. If you can't say it out loud because you feel like you're going to be embarrassed because you're somewhere in the public or you're around your family, then just say it quietly in your mind. I'm about to eat this cookie, but I know that eating this cookie isn't necessarily good for my health and will likely cause me to get fat. And so talk yourself out of it. That's a health a method for pointing and calling for your health. All right, so this is everything that I wanted to share with you from this chapter. It's simply amazing, this book. I'm studying it. I'm reading it 30 times, and you're getting the best bits of it. And the next chapter is going to be amazing as well. So have a look at that video. That's going to be the chapter on the best way to start a new habit. So he's giving more systems and techniques and solutions for starting a new habit. So put this to work. And if you like this, let me know in the comments below, and get your new habits under control. All right, speak soon.